Sozen, let's talk about the beginning of the Ōnin War, in 1467. Before that, Kyoto was engulfed in the flames of war.
Katsumoto. What was Yoshimasa-sama's state of mind at that time?
Yoshimasa was troubled by the question of his successor. While he wanted Yoshimasa as his successor, Yoshimasa also had strong support for him.
And that conflict has sparked off our guardian feudal lords, hasn't it?
That is exactly right. I supported Yoshimasa and stood up as the Eastern Army with Yoshimasa behind me. You supported Yoshihisa and stood up as the Western Army.
Our conflict over control of Kyoto was not just a power struggle. It was a major issue that also affected political influence.
Finally, in May 1467, our tensions reached a climax and a clash became inevitable.
Can you elaborate on which area of Kyoto the first clashes took place?
The first clash occurred in the eastern part of Kyoto. We, the Eastern Army, tried to stop the advance of the Western Army.
Certainly, the battle was fierce. But why was Kyoto so important?
Kyoto was not just a capital, but a political center. To seize control of the city meant control of the entire country.
I see. That is why so many warriors came from all over.
Kyoto had become a veritable battlefield. But even in the midst of this, we always had to develop a strategy to stay one step ahead.
Katsumoto, what exactly was your strategy?
First, he strengthened his ties with Yoshimasa's brother, Yoshimitsu, and used his political support. Then, he concentrated on consolidating the eastern part of Kyoto and blocking the progress of the Western Army.
The war situation was getting tougher by the day, but how did the people feel?
The people were filled with fear and anxiety. Life was transformed as the war raged and many homes were destroyed.
Did its impact on the economy?
Of course. Commercial activity stagnated and many artisans and merchants lost their jobs. Kyoto's economy was hit hard.
The battle dragged on and ended up being a war that lasted more than a decade.
That's right. In 1477, my army finally gained the upper hand and drove the Western Army out of Kyoto.
But even that victory did not fully restore the authority of the shogunate.
Indeed, the authority of the shogunate did not return as it had before. The foundation was laid for the local feudal lords to become independent and move on to the warring states period.
Katsumoto, looking back on the fight, do you think you could have made any different choices?
Sometimes I think so. But I think I made what I thought was the best choice under the circumstances at the time.
Well, history always re-examines what was right. Our actions will also be evaluated by future generations.
That's right. The Ōnin Rebellion changed our lives, and we must continue to think about how it affected the history of Japan.
Katsumoto, thank you for sharing your valuable story with us today. It helped me to reflect on the past and think about the future.
No, it is my pleasure, Susan. Let us continue to study history together and deepen our understanding.
Katsumoto, understanding the political situation before the Ōnin Rebellion began is the key to grasping the essence of this rebellion.
That is true, but how did you view the situation, Sozen?
First, it all started with the question of General Yoshimasa's successor. The dispute over the successor between Yoshimasa and Yoshimitsu spilled over into our daimyo.
Certainly the conflict was a major problem. But why weren't there other solutions to get there?
The problem was that because of Yoshimasa's partiality, he lacked impartial judgment. And that inequality was creating dissatisfaction among our feudal lords.
I understand your frustration, but what do you think influenced it to the point where it escalated into an armed conflict?
The weakening of the power structure of the Muromachi shogunate was also significant. The local guardian feudal lords became more competent and began to challenge the central authority.
That the balance of power has shifted. But was it inevitable that we would be at odds with each other in the process?
For me, supporting Yoshinaga was to protect the stability and legitimacy of the shogunate. This, in turn, resulted in a deepening of the conflict.
I supported Yoshimitsu in order to balance the power within the shogunate. Don't you think your actions have instead caused instability?
The equilibrium was in name only, and in reality meant an expansion of your power. That is what prompted me to act.
It's not an effort to expand the power of the shogunate, it's an effort to restore the normal functioning of the shogunate. But how did you take that?
I saw it as a monopoly of power. And I saw that imbalance as leading to further instability in the shogunate.
I understand that you feel there is an imbalance, but was there any room for adjustment other than leading up to the fight?
Discussions were held many times, but in the end, each side had conflicting interests. Coordination was difficult.
Still, the cost of turning Kyoto into a battlefield was too great. Did you not realize that?
They were aware of it. But things had already progressed beyond our control. We had no choice but to go with the flow.
Does going with the flow mean that it is just an inevitable part of history?
Yes, it is an inevitability of history. We acted in response to the demands of the times, regardless of how it will be evaluated by future generations.
You say you were responding to the needs of the times, but many of your people suffered because of it. Do you feel no responsibility for that?
Of course I feel it. But it may have required a greater sacrifice to avoid it.
What is the great sacrifice? Explain more specifically.
For example, to choose reconciliation, even if it meant throwing everything away. But that was not an option we could choose at the time.
Was the situation so desperate that reconciliation was not an option?
Rather than hopeless, it was more realistic to establish a firm position through fighting than through the uncertain future that reconciliation would bring.
The fight to establish a firm position ended up further weakening the shogunate. Did you not notice the contradiction?
We were aware, but by then it was already too late. We believed that our actions would pave the way for the future.
What was the future like that you believed in?
It is a more stable political system. The reality, however, was different from our expectations.
When faced with a reality that differed from your expectations, what did you think?
I thought many things, but what I felt most strongly was that the world of politics is unpredictable.
How were we to behave in the face of unpredictable politics? I still don't know. Sozen, a long time has passed since the end of the Ōnin War, but its impact is still deeply engraved in Japanese history.
Certainly, Katsumoto and the rebellion had a profound impact on the social structure of Japan. In particular, the authority of the shogunate was greatly reduced, which contributed to the upheavals that occurred later in the Warring States period.
That's right. The decline in authority created an opportunity for the local feudal lords to act more independently. We had no idea at the time that our conflict would lead to such a future.
At that time, each of them was so desperate to maintain their own position and power that they may not have had the time to look at the big picture.
That may be so, but it is also true that many warriors sought to establish themselves as a result, and this movement encouraged the development of diverse cultures and technologies during the Warring States period.
The development of culture and technology was certainly one bright spot. The blossoming of culture, especially in the rural areas, is a positive part of the impact of the rebellion.
This is certainly true, as the devastation of Kyoto has caused people to move to the countryside, resulting in the creation of new cultural centers in various parts of the country.
However, it was also accompanied by the suffering of many people. The economic damage to Kyoto was enormous, and its recovery took a long time.
I never imagined when we started the fight that the power struggle in Kyoto would have such far-reaching effects.
The effects of warfare are difficult to predict. Perhaps that is why other means should have been sought before resorting to force.
I agree with that statement. If more attempts had been made to resolve the situation through dialogue, history might have turned out differently.
However, with the tensions and power struggles of the time, this was not an environment in which this was possible. Each side would end up taking hard-line measures to protect their own positions.
Certainly, the situation at that time did not give us many options. But even so, the sacrifice was too great.
Every time I think of the sacrifices made, my heart grows heavier. So many innocent people were involved and their lives have been changed forever.
As a lesson of history, the Ōnin Rebellion has in many ways been a wake-up call to our posterity.
It is our responsibility to remember that wake-up call and seek a more peaceful solution.
Finding a peaceful solution is indeed important. That is what we should learn from history.
Katsumoto, as we talk about this, I wonder if we would have handled it differently if we knew what we know now.
Times and circumstances dictate people's choices to a great extent. But surely, from today's perspective, we could have been more flexible.
We cannot change the past, but we can strive to avoid repeating the same mistakes in the future.
To do so, they need to look back on history, think deeply, and engage in discussion, as we do.
I'm reminded of the importance of learning from history.
We must not forget that through the Ōnin Rebellion, not only was there a struggle for power, but also a profound impact on people's lives and culture.
Exactly, and it is our role to understand how it has affected society as a whole.
Sozen, I hope that by having this kind of dialogue, we can help more people learn the lessons of history.
Katsumoto, I hope this dialogue will be beneficial to many. History always asks us questions and teaches us lessons.
A correct understanding of history is essential to this. It is important to get the facts right and to exchange opinions based on them.
We hope that through history people will be able to make better decisions. That is the meaning of our study of history.
Sozen, today's discussion was very meaningful. I would like to continue these discussions in the future.
Katsumoto, I agree. There is no end to what we can learn from history. I hope our dialogue will help in this regard.
Sozen, at the beginning of the rebellion, I had no doubt that I was doing the right thing. But now, looking back, many questions arise.
Katsumoto, it is the same for me. My heart is still heavy, especially with regard to his support for Yoshino, which deepened the division within the shogunate.
In order to gain Yoshimasa's support, I put Yoshimasa behind me. However, I cannot help but feel responsible when I think that this led to the confusion in Kyoto.
Katsumoto, I share that sense of responsibility. How many innocent people have suffered because of our decisions?
Sozen, our goal was a stable shogunate. However, the sacrifices made in the process were too great.
Certainly, the goal was the same. But whether the means were optimal is now in question.
In the midst of war, I sometimes made ruthless decisions. I had told myself that this was for the sake of the shogunate, but now the thought of that tightens my heart.
Katsumoto, I also walked the same path. I thought victory in battle was all that mattered, but it was heartbreaking to see the devastation that followed.
Sozen, perhaps we should have explored other avenues more at that time. We should have sought peace instead of relying on force.
I agree deeply with that statement. However, we were probably blinded at the time to maintain our own position.
To keep their position and to hold on to power. I thought it was all justified, but now I feel it was not all.
Katsumoto, the aftereffects of our actions were more than just a political victory. It is keenly felt now.
Sozen, given the impact we have caused, the judgment of history will be harsh.
I know you do, Katsumoto. But isn't it our duty to accept that harsh judgment and learn from it?
Learning, that's the only word I can think of. It is our responsibility as living people to apply the lessons from history.
Katsumoto, it remains to be seen how our choices will affect future generations, but for this reason it is important that we continue to speak the truth.
By discussing the truth and what is in our hearts, perhaps a new understanding will emerge.
A new understanding, that is the path we must take, to learn from the mistakes of the past and build a better future.
Sozen, both what I gained and what I lost in that battle are heavy. But today, I feel that what I lost is far greater.
Katsumoto. We hope that the next generation will carry the weight of what they have lost and make a different choice. That will be our hope.
It is our wish, and our duty. We are responsible for the future by doing justice to the past. That is the best we can do.
Katsumoto. I feel a little lighter after this talk. I am grateful for the opportunity to talk with you.
Soze, I appreciate it as well. I feel that by exposing our hearts to each other, a new understanding was born.
Let us continue to have this dialogue and remember to learn from history and contribute to the future.
For this reason, it is important to pass on our experience and knowledge to the next generation, so that they do not repeat the same mistakes.
Katsumoto. What we learned from that battle, we must continue to tell our story to make the most of it.
We will continue to tell our story, that is our mission. We believe that through history we can shape the future.
Katsumoto. Let us hold on to that belief and walk together. May the lessons of history bring light to the future.
Sozen, the impact of the Ōnin rebellion on Kyoto was not merely political turmoil. What do you think of the major impact it had on the economy and culture as well?
Katsumoto, you are right. Especially on the economic front, commercial activity in central Kyoto stagnated, and many merchants and craftsmen lost their livelihood. The effects of this spread outside of Kyoto and spilled over into the economy of Japan as a whole.
As the war ravaged the city of Kyoto, many cultural assets were also lost. This was an incalculable loss to Japanese culture.
Indeed, for example, famous temples and shrines were destroyed, and many works of art and books were burned along with them. Many of these were impossible to rebuild.
On the other hand, however, the social upheaval caused by the rebellion also triggered the birth of new cultural movements. For example, people scattered to the provinces contributed to the development of local culture.
As it happened, it was not uncommon for new towns to flourish in regions far from Kyoto, and for them to become new centers of culture. This movement led to cultural diversification in the later Warring States period.
Politically, the Ōnin War reduced the authority of the shogunate, which in turn accelerated the independence of local feudal lords. As a result, the centralized system was further weakened and an era of division and independence advanced.
In fact, after this rebellion, the Muromachi shogunate became a nominal entity, and the real power shifted to the local feudal lords. This is what triggered the turmoil of the Warring States period.
Turning to the lives of the people, the rebellion left many people in a difficult situation. In rural areas in particular, the shortage of labor due to the war became a serious problem.
In part, this shortage of labor was a factor in encouraging innovation in agricultural technology. The difficult situation motivated them to seek technological advances.
It should also be noted that the turmoil of this period encouraged the geographic dispersion of commerce. New routes of commerce were formed as merchants moved from Kyoto to the provinces.
This accelerated the development of regional cities and triggered the formation of new economic blocks. This change will redraw the economic map of Japan.
From a cultural perspective, the spillover of Kyoto culture to the provinces created the soil for the blossoming of unique local cultures. This can be seen, for example, in the process of spreading the tea ceremony.
Indeed, local feudal lords and wealthy merchants sought to establish their cultural status through the tea ceremony. This helped to promote the rise of a new culture.
Thus, the Ōnin rebellion brought much destruction and chaos, but it was also a catalyst for change in Japan's socio-economic structure.
That transformation greatly influenced the direction of later Japanese history. In this light, the historical significance of the Ōnin rebellion is more than just a civil war.
The lessons of history that can be seen through the Ōnin rebellion are manifold. We in today's Japan have much to learn from those lessons.
History always poses a question to us. What can we learn from the Ōnin War and how can we apply it to the future? It is up to those of us living in the present to find the answers to these questions.
Sozen, we have talked a lot about this Ōnin rebellion over the years, but today I dare to say something that can only be said now.
Katsumoto, your words carry a lot of weight. I, too, can now say something very clear.
Sozen, at the time, tried to take real power in the shogunate at any cost. But how many people it would cause to suffer?
Katsumoto, I, too, was at the mercy of power. For this, I sacrificed many innocent lives.
We fought for power, but we never really imagined that the results would manifest themselves in this way.
Katsumoto, in hindsight, I should have taken steps earlier at that time. I should have explored the path of reconciliation more seriously.
I agree with that statement. But sometimes it seems that fate moves beyond our will.
Fate, yes, that may be true. But it is also true that our choices had the power to change the course of history.
Sozen, I now feel the weight of the fact that our conflict was a contributing factor in bringing about the Warring States period later on.
Katsumoto, I too am acutely aware of this responsibility. If I could go back to that time again, I would make a different choice.
Sozen, I did not expect you to say that. Neither did I. If I could turn back time, I would save more lives.
Katsumoto, our conflict was not just a power struggle. I can now say unequivocally that it was much more than that.
Sozen, I deeply sympathize with your words. It was not only our political ambitions, but also the circumstances of the time that drove us.
Certainly, the situation was shaping us. But we also needed the courage to challenge them.
Sozen, it is not too late. Let us pass on our experiences to future generations and guide them so that they will not repeat the same mistakes.
Katsumoto, I agree with your suggestion. Learning from our mistakes will be our greatest contribution to the future.
Sozen, I hope that this dialogue today will be meaningful to many people.
Katsumoto, I feel the same way. History demands to learn from us.
Sozen, I believe that an honest discussion of our past will deepen our understanding of history.
Katsumoto, I hope that what is said here today will be passed down as part of history.
Sozen, we have learned a lot through this long battle. It is our mission to apply those lessons.
Katsumoto, I feel that the path we have taken together now has new value.
Sozen, I hope our dialogue will serve as a bridge to the future.
Katsumoto, I hope our story will be useful to all students of history.
Sozen, I hope that what you have said here today will resonate with many people.
Katsumoto, I hope that our experience will serve as a useful lesson for future generations.
Sozen, it was really nice to have the dialogue. I appreciate it.
Katsumoto, thank you too. I am glad that our hearts are with each other.
Thank you, dear readers, for sharing this long journey with us.
Dear readers, I hope our story will be of some use to you. Thank you very much.